So I guess when this book is successful, you're gonna go off the rails with a third one and make a new one called, I guess, The Real Meth Heads of Mars, maybe?
You know what's hysterical is I was talking to my son. He's a really good artist, my oldest son, and I was like, dude, I want to do a comic book with you. Like, you do all the drawings, I'll write the bubbles, and we could call it Attack of the Meth Heads.
You are now listening to the podcast where authors inspire listeners to become authors, the Going North Podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer, best-selling author, and book enthusiast, Dom Brightmon. And you're going to be listening to a different author that will inspire you to join the business of immortality, known as authorship. Now let the fun begin. Today's episode is sponsored by the Going North Podcast.com shop. Head over to that wonderful website to pick up some merchandise. We got shirts, hoodies, mugs, t-shirts, flags, notebooks, journals, just about almost everything under the sun, even stickers and buttons indeed for your lanyards and for your decorations as well. And we got multiple designs, advance others to advance yourself. We got the GoingNorthPodcast.com logo as well as outread your competition to outlead your competition. And we even got bags too, so check out the wonderful podcast merch shop and be on the lookout for sales. They got wonderful 35% off sales spread out throughout every single month, so that way you can save even more money, so you can get more bang for your buck, so you can bang out your goals through the inspiration you're going to get today on this podcast. Check it out like a library book, my friends. And today on the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, known as the Going North Podcast, we got another super special, awesome human for it today, courtesy of my buddy Mickey Mickelson, all the way from Texas. That's right, indeed. Used to be from Canada, but the barbecue had him sold, baby. That's right, indeed. We legally kidnapped another one. That's right, indeed. He's been naturalized. That's right, indeed. He's now American. That's right, indeed. The brainwashing's working. He's got a flag on his head somewhere. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. But hey, speaking of flags on heads, we got another fun fact for you because today's guest is an award-winning author. So they're a decorated author, and they're also a U.S. Navy veteran. So yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. America number one forever for a reason, dang gummit. And he's a husband and a father of 5 kids, no less. So a man has got energy and patience for days as a result, just by default for being a father of 5 kids, as well as a cybersecurity expert and tattoo enthusiast. Let's give it up for the GSG himself, the one and only GS Gerry. How you doing today, Gerry?
Doing great, Dom. Thanks for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be on and connect with other individuals and creators, and especially podcast hosts. You have a great podcast yourself. It's a pleasure to be here.
Woohoo! Pleasure to have you on the show, man, especially since you're a U.S. Navy veteran, my man. Always got to give on to the veterans, man. I usually try to do my homework, but I didn't get all the questions right. So how many years were you in service in the Navy?
So I was in for 7 years. I actually hit my 10-year mark of being out of the Navy last year. So it's been a little over 10 years since I've been in the Navy. Joined when I basically had my 19th birthday when I was in boot camp, and then I had my first child shortly thereafter. And yeah, I was in for 7 years. Got my degree, got out, and then kind of just started doing the cybersecurity thing from there on out.
Sweet. Well, thanks a bunch for your 7 years of service. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Because that's no easy feat. Indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Getting in, staying in, and then being able to get out, and then my goodness, getting into cybersecurity no less. So what led to that transition? Did you love looking at the computers during your downtime while you were in the Navy? Like, how was that transition?
Yeah, so whenever I was going to college in the Navy, I was like thinking, what could I do for a career, right? And like I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I could do this, I could do that, right? I mean, you can essentially do anything, you can go to school for anything. But I was like, I felt like computers was the way to go because everything was, pretty much run by computers then. It's only going to get more involved and more integrated as the years go by. So I was like, I feel like if I get into, technology, IT, I'll always have a job. And so that's really the reason I went into it. It wasn't like some great passion. It was really just kind of looking down the line and thinking about having some kind of job security.
I hear you indeed, because, yeah, IT, the ever evolving field, is kind of like doctor work, is they got to stay up to date on just about everything as opposed to disease with people. You got to think about the disease from these darn computers.
It's so true. I mean, there's so much new technology that comes out, and then everything's now in the cloud. Before it used to be a cloud was like this thing that like it was like, oh, it's in the cloud. What's that even mean? Right now, people actually know. Everything's just even moving further to the cloud as the years go on. So, as you say, the technology continues to evolve. So we're always training, always learning. I actually do cybersecurity compliance. So you go swipe your card at Walmart or Target or any of these other stores, right? That card is connected. And so I basically make sure that your credit card numbers are secure anywhere you use them.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's what I'm talking about indeed. So, what got you interested in writing and letting alone joining the business of immortality by publishing a book, no less?
Yeah, so I actually never thought I was going to be an author. I mean, I don't read a ton of books, I'll say. I have 5 kids, life is pretty busy, I'll say, from over here. But it was actually kind of work that led me to becoming an author. And so we do a lot of technical report writing at work. Some of the reports can range anywhere from 300 pages to 700 pages or more. And I had a situation at work where a customer calls me up one day and she's like, "Hey, Gerry, I just want to let you know our report is the exact same as last year." And I was like, "Oh no, please tell me this isn't true, right? Because if this report is plagiarized, I have to rewrite the whole report. And this is like a 500-page report at this point." So I was
Ooh.
like, yeah, I'm like, "Hey, just let me review the report. Let me make sure what you're saying is accurate, right? Because I wrote the report from the previous year, so oh my gosh, please don't tell me this guy that works for me copied my report." I start reading through it page by page. Sure enough, everything's completely identical. It's like right when the pandemic is happening, so no one's traveling anywhere. There is no on sites, and so I keep reading through the report. When we went on site, we visited these things, we looked at these settings, and I'm like, ah, she's 100% right. Like this report is completely plagiarized from the previous year. So I call her up. I'm like, "Yep, you're 100% right. I'll make this right." And so I pick up the report and I start rewriting it, rewrite every single requirement and control. And it grows from like 500 pages to 750 pages. And it takes me 2.5 months to actually fix the report. When I get done, I'm like, man, feels like I just wrote a novel. That's it. I'm gonna write a book. I had this hilarious situation happen to me whenever I was trying to sell my house. I was like, you know what, this would make for a great book. And so that's really what happened. I just decided one day, hey, I'm gonna write a book. That's what I did.
That's right indeed. That's right indeed. And listening to some of your past interviews was actually kind of freaking hilarious because, like, what was it? I think you're trying to sell your house, and then apparently they smelled some plastic or something. They thought it was meth.
Oh man, it's so much more than that. But yes, there is meth in the book is actually called Meth Murder in Amazon. I was working at Amazon at the time. I was trying to sell my house, kind of move closer to my mom and family in Florida, which is where I'm at now. So I did make it down here. But along the way, it ends up taking us multiple real estate agents. So, I'd like to ask you, how many real estate agents do you think it takes to sell a house? I'll wait and people will be like, one, right? Like that's the most logical response. And then like, yeah, you would think, right? And so it doesn't actually take us one real estate agent, it takes us three. And so along the way, when we get to actually our second real estate agent, we have an open house. Me and my wife and all our kids were in Florida visiting my mom. And I get a call one afternoon, I think it's a Sunday. This is right when the open house is supposed to happen. My real estate agent calls me. She's freaking out. She's like, Gerry, there's someone inside the house. Did you know that there's someone inside the house?" I'm like, "Excuse me? What do you mean there's someone inside the house?" She's like, "Yes, there's someone inside the house and they're under the bed." I was like, "What?" She's like, "There's no one supposed to be here, right?" I'm like, "No, there's no one supposed to be here." She's like, "Great." I called the cops. Cops show up, they go through the house. Nothing happens, right? Worst case of perception meets reality. Then 4 days later, I get another call from still in Florida, and she just had a meeting at her real estate firm, and she's like, "Oh yeah, every Thursday we have a meeting, with the owners as well as all the real estate agents." And so we were talking about your listing, and when we were in your garage, we smelled something that smelled like burning plastic. And I don't know if you know this or not, but she's like, burning plastic means meth. And so we think that someone could have been making meth or smoking meth on the premises. And so we're going to need you to get a meth test done, or we're going to flag your house in the MLS for suspicious behavior. And so I'm like, what? what do you mean meth? Like, right, this is a nice house. It's in the suburbs, like a two-car garage. And up until this point, I'd never seen Breaking Bad, right? And so I start telling people this story, and they're like, dude, that sounds like Breaking Bad. I'm like, all right, I have to watch this. Start watching it, and it gets to the scene where Jesse and Walter are making meth in their basement. I'm like, yep, this is it. This has to have been what happened. They watched Breaking Bad like recently. They watched that episode and are like, oh yeah, this must be a meth house. Look at these guys, right? They have people, under their bed that have been murdered. Now they're making meth in the garage. And so like it was just a crazy, ridiculous situation. So I kind of took those events and that situation that happened to me, and I kind of just basically turned lemons into lemonade, if you will. I like to use humor in my books and my writing, and so I definitely use a lot of satire. I compare the real estate agents to actually assassins, right? They have a contract for hire, they have a job to do. And so along these different events that happen as I try to sell my house, they assassinate my character, they come after my family, they say all these ridiculous things, right? Like I wouldn't say I have a spotless record, right? Like I have speeding tickets, but right, like I've never been arrested, like I've never been in jail or anything. So the fact that they would even say this is just like it's mind blowing. And so I would tell this story to my friends and stuff. And like, dude, this sounds like made up. Like it sounds like you made this up. I'm like, dude, there's no way that I can make this up. Like I couldn't make this up if I tried.
Yeah, that's freaking hilarious. Yeah, that's freaking hilarious because it's like, yeah. And Breaking Bad, like when it first came out, freaking huge and still a great show to this day. And it's like, man, did they? You probably think like, man, did the whole dang office watch the first season or whatever, like in that
It,
meeting or
it
something?
it really felt like the epitome of Murphy's Law when I was trying to sell my house. What can go wrong will go wrong, and it did so, but on like such a monumental scale that it was just defeating, right? Like every time we tried to do something, crash and burn. Every time we would try to like, all right, we'll lower the price, we'll do staging, right? We'll do all these things that you're supposed to do when you're selling your house. And so, I take the readers on the journey and I kind of share with them along the way. Like if you've never sold a house, like you don't know what you're getting into, right? Like everybody makes it seem so easy. Hey, hire a real estate agent, you list your house, you sell your house. It should be that easy. In theory, it should be, but that's not always how it goes. And so this was actually our first house that we sold. And this is all just the craziness that happens. And so it's like, man, like this is just make for like a great story. And so I did it, put it out there. Even the way it came out was kind of funny because Amazon has pre-order, and that's kind of what I did. And I went to actually submit the paperback and the hardcover versions for pre-order. Well, Amazon doesn't have pre-order for print edition books. And you didn't know that, but I'm going through the Amazon, like with checking all the boxes, filling all the information, and at the end it's like publish your book. I'm like, all right, they didn't ask me for like a pre-order date, so maybe they're going to ask me after I hit publish. Hit publish, sure enough, it's like, hey, your book will be ready in 72 hours. So I'm like, oh, there's no going back now. And so that's kind of how it happened, right? And so usually when you push a book out, right, you're supposed to market it and all these things. This is my first time ever doing this, and so I'm like, man, it should sell, right? And that's obviously not what happens. And so I actually learned a lot of marketing and a lot of techniques and tips and tricks along the way. But if the book wouldn't have come out the way it did, right? It came out like 2 months before it was supposed to. My mom would actually never saw the book. She would never know that was out there because she died last year in March, and the book would have released like 3 weeks after she passed away. So I felt like it was a God thing, that the book came out the way that it did because she was able to be a part of it. She actually read it and we talked about it. So it happened how it was supposed to happen.
Yeah, man, sorry to hear about that, man. That's definitely rough, especially in March like that. Like, my goodness, definitely indeed. But
Yeah,
man,
even another God thing, right? I mean, I feel like my mom passed away like early March, and then at the end of March, we found out that my wife was pregnant with our fifth child, and like we weren't like trying to have kids, like have another kid. We already had four this time, but then we found out she was pregnant, and so I felt like that was almost like another like God, I was looking down. Is one thing ends, another begins, and so it was cool that it happened like that. I feel like it definitely kind of eased the loss, and we still talk about her from time to time. His kids still talk about her, but it's always good things.
that's right indeed. That's right indeed. Finding the good old lemonade out of the lemons. You love to see it. You'll love to see it indeed. So, my goodness, so it was like putting a book together, especially with it being a nice, easy read of 100 I guess 30 some pages, if I'm not mistaken, as opposed to.
So So the book is 247 pages is like what it says. Like the way I wrote the book is a little bit different than what a normal book would read like would read like. And so kind of did it that way, right? I was like, hey, if I'm gonna write a book, right, I want to do something just completely different. I want to write a book that are, there's millions of books out there, probably the same stories over and over again, just with like a different lens or a different viewpoint on it. Like I want to do something just crazy different. And so I actually use a completely different way to write the book. I'll use on purpose run-on sentences, all on purpose misspell words, right? It all adds to kind of the depth and the dynamic for the book. But I wanted to do it different, so that's kind of why I did it. And so technically, it's like 247 pages, but like when I used Scrivener to actually compile the book, it said it's like an hour and a half read. So it's probably closer to 150 true pages of reading. Breaks out that way.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's what I'm talking about indeed. And heck, you got some success stories under your belt, being able to win some awards too for the book for being a first time author, no less. How'd it feel?
Oh man, it was great. Like I submitted to these awards and I was like, man, like I wonder if I'm gonna win one, right? And like you go and read the book descriptions and they're constantly saying like, hey, looking for something new, looking for a fresh perspective. I was like, man, this is me all the way because I wrote something completely different. Like there's nothing else out there like that. Plus, if you throw in the fact like the way I read it, right, it's very unique, like it stands on its own. So I'm like, hey, I think I got a good shot here. And so I think I maybe submitted to 10. And so the first couple, like I didn't hear anything, I didn't win. And then all of a sudden I won. The one contest I won, I actually won for two awards, best cover and best comedy and slash humor. And like I showed everybody, I was so excited. I was like, oh yeah, see, that's exactly it. And so I was really pumped about it. It was cool to share that. And then after one, then came two and three, and then I ended up actually winning 6 awards in total for the book. So thought that was cool. It kind of gave me some credibility, right? Like I write crazy, funny stories, but there's actually more to it than just the humor. And so I think that's cool. It kind of helped me kind of continue to push forward and start to write another book. And so I actually do have another book that's coming out later this year.
Sweet. So, any details on what to expect from the upcoming book?
Yes, so the new book is called Hysterical Hangouts with the Hind Legs, and it's going to be a reality show, but in a book. So, legitimate reality show. There's going to be hidden cameras. People are going to look at the camera and speak into it, right? So, it's really going to feel like you're almost watching a reality show, but you're actually reading the book. And so, the book is really about family, meeting family. You meet your girlfriend, right? Part of the step is right. You got to meet the parents and got to meet their parents, and then you got to meet the family. And so, what happens if you go to do those things and you go to meet the dad and the mom and you record the whole thing? And so that's kind of the premise for the book. Is so I basically take you from the time that I step foot to meet, my girlfriend's parents and her family until the very end of the ride. And so you go through a whole different series of events, and you just see like basically what is the biggest stereotype when you go to meet like your girlfriend's dad, right? Like, hey, he's at the table, he's got a shotgun, right? He's cleaning the shotgun, he's cleaning all his guns. And so I'll take that and I'll amplify it. And I feel like not only is he cleaning his guns, but he's engraved my initials on the shotgun shells, right? And then he actually has like a bloodstained machete, right? So like super intimidating. So kind of trying to use the reality show to kind of amplify it and make it feel like you're actually watching it, but it does play on those like just different family dynamics that you have within the family, whether it's the in-laws or the actual, the other side of the family, the in-law side of the house. And so I like to use, my actual experiences and kind of integrate them into the books. But this one is actually fiction. This isn't, nonfiction. So kind of dip myself in the fiction realm and see how it goes.
That'll go north indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Reality TV show and a book. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. The images might stick even longer and harder as opposed to regular reality TV shows indeed.
Yeah, when I was doing research for this and I was looking around for like books that were written as reality shows, like you'll find elements of reality show, like the Hunger Games, right? Like there's a reality show element in this like other world, but it's like not a true reality show. And then Stephen King wrote a book called The Running Man, and again, there's like elements of reality show, but there's like no big time books that are just a reality show that can stand on its own like that. And so as I was thinking of like how I would do this, I was like, this could be something different, right? Like just another way to separate myself, to kind of differentiate myself as an author from what's out there. Like my first book is an experience, but it's also like you're riding a roller coaster. And so in the first book, I actually will put a ton of roller coaster references in the book, and say, hey, you get on the roller coaster, you start going up, right? Click, 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 and the anticipation start building. And so I'll actually throw those terms in there. You'll go down that roller coaster, something crazy will happen. You'll go around a loop, something else crazy will happen. So I'm constantly tying the story back to like actually being on a roller coaster. So it can almost be like, hey, this is the first book that actually makes you feel like you're on a roller coaster. The second book is going to be like you're actually watching a reality show. And so this one I actually did use an editor. It is a professionally edited book, and so it will read like a true book, whereas the first one just is different.
Sweet. So I guess when this book is successful, you're gonna go off the rails with a third one and make a new one called, I guess, the real meth heads of Mars, maybe.
You know what's hysterical is I was talking to my son. He's a really good artist, my oldest son, and I was like, dude, I want to do a comic book with you. Like you do all the drawings, I'll write the bubbles, and we could call it Attack of the Meth Heads. And so I was talking to him about this, and he's like so into it. He's like, yes, we should do this. He's like, I don't know how I would do the comic book. I was like, who cares, right? Like, let's just start. Let's see what happens. If anything, we can just keep this in the family, right? It'll be fun. But if it's good, right, then we can release it. And so I think I got him on board with it. But I thought that would kind of be fun, right? Like, just kind of make a little spin off of it. I even thought about making like a kid's book, not necessarily Meth Murder in Amazon, but it was going to be something like about like the backpack and like going to sleep under the bed, right? It was going to be like a really funny play on it, but it was going to be like really targeted towards children. So like I thought about different ideas. We talked about the possibility of actually writing a book that's like you're playing a video game. So I thought that might be a cool idea. So you have the retro games like NBA Jam. Obviously, there's Madden, Mortal Kombat, right? And so they all have these special combinations that you can do. So I was thinking, like, what if you wrote a book and actually put the actual combinations, like, hey, this is a fatality for this, or hey, this is like the juke move for Madden, or right, like all these different combinations, and actually put them in there. So as you're going on, like reading the story, then I'd be like, and then he hits XY backspace R, right? And then boom, something happens. And so I thought that could be fun. And I ended up finding out that Ready Player One is actually it's a book. And I didn't know that, right? I seen the movie, but I never read the book. And so then I found out it was actually a book. I was like, okay, this has been done before. But his is a reality. It's like virtual reality, which is not what I'll be doing. It would be more like handheld game or console type game.
Hey, it can be done again. Shoot, there's always a different spin and different taste for everyone. Indeed, Nick. Maybe even link up with, I guess, one of our past guests. I think he was also. Oh, well, actually, maybe not. He wasn't Mickey's client, but Morgan Quaid. He's actually in Australia. He was crowdfunding to fund the project for his comic book series. So who knows? Might be a great
Oh,
idea or a
that's
great
cool.
path to go down.
Maybe I should reach out to him. Be like, hey, talk to me about this.
Be like, yeah, Dom bragged about you. He's like, he said you're the
Yeah,
man to talk to about these comic books here. Like, I'm trying to get
that's
the
right.
meth heads to get on Mars, dang it. They're about to attack us.
Oh man, I had such a good concept too for like the attack, right? Because like the house is in it and like our family's in it. And I was like, hey, the comic book could be we're in the house, we're eating dinner, and all of a sudden, we just happen to have the news on, and then all of a sudden there's like an attack, like a mass outbreak of all of these like zombies, right? But we'll call them methods. And so the methods look like zombies, and so the zombies like start converging on the house, and so they start breaking in, and we have to like fend them off with like guns and grenades, right? Whatever we have in the house, we're basically going to beat them back. And so like we'll go through all these different pages of the comic books, fighting them, different things we'll do to them, right, to basically keep ourselves safe. And then once we exit the house, then we're going to see like a huge horde of zombies that have surrounded the entire neighborhood, and then it's going to end. And then I'll be like, all right, if it does good, I'll create another one. That's kind of what I was thinking if I would actually do it.
Yeah. Well, hey, if you go down that path for real and it becomes a success, you're welcome back. And I'll definitely want to add that
Absolutely.
to the. I gotta add that one to the library. Be freaking hilarious.
Yeah. I feel like it would be really funny, I've heard people say like, oh, you can't really do meth. Meth's such a big topic right now because they're like legalizing all these hardcore substances, like hey, Seattle, even Canada. are actually like basically like making it as like a misdemeanor if you get caught with it, if you're under the influence, whatever, which is terrible. But I was thinking, hey, like anything could be funny, right? Like I wrote a book about meth and murder, and it's completely humorous the whole way through. So you can do it. It's just a sensitive subject. So I think I definitely thought the comic book idea would be funny, but I'm sure there's people like, oh, you can't talk about that. That's not okay.
Uh, well, uh, hey, maybe you can call them Attack of the Pluto heads, where I guess the meth is shaped like little planets of Pluto instead, or something like that. And it's
maybe
like
maybe
they.
Attack of the Math Heads, right? Where they all have like equations and these hardcore math problems, and we're like shooting them, and then like their the equation explodes or something.
That's right, indeed. Revenge of the Nerds. Forget that. This is next level, baby.
That's right. That's right.
So, my goodness, since you've been on a bit of an interview tour promoting the work that you're doing with your marvelous books, is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often?
Oh, that's a good one. Question I wish folks would ask me more often. I guess it did it actually happen, right? And so like I tell the story of it, and I feel like sometimes people are like, no, he's making it up, or like, no, this is like mostly fiction. It did happen. A lot of it did happen. I tried to keep the first story as true to possible as the actual events. I actually included photos from my family, photos of the house. I obviously put it through like a little photo editor and kind of changed a little bit about it, but I even included the police report in there. And then I always like to, I wish people would ask like, hey, what wasn't included in the book? And so after this happened, when they accused me of making meth in my garage, I was like, I'm going to talk to a lawyer, right? Like, there's no way they can do this. Like, this has to be defamation of character, slander, something, right? And so I go to talk to a lawyer and I explain what happened. They're like, yeah, they can't do that. That's not right. They go and talk to the real estate agents, and they, first they're like, who's this person? We don't know what you're talking about. And then, of course, they get
Yep.
all the actual details, and then they're like, oh, that guy, right? And then they actually like shared some information. Come to find out that because Colorado has such a huge problem with methamphetamine, that if any real estate agent in the state of Colorado even suspects there's meth on the premises, it is within their rights to order you to get a meth test done, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so the lawyer shared this with me. I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm pretty much screwed, right? Just they can just say whatever they want. I just have to deal with it, and hopefully, no one says anything bad about me. And so it was kind of upsetting, but I mean, it almost fit with the theme of what I was going through with life. It was like just literally, it was like a roller coaster, ups, downs, highs, lows, and so many twists and turns in between.
Indeed, roller coaster swag, indeed. Cause yeah, cause I guess I forgot to ask that question earlier too. Cause yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff there that may have probably didn't make it into the final draft, the final cut before the publish button was hit. That's right,
Yeah, I
indeed.
mean, I tried to do it different too, right? Like, lots of books, even movies, TV shows, right? Like they have these moments that you're like, why is this in here? Like, what, wasting my time watching this. Why is this even in here? And so when I wrote this, my goal was to basically be like, hey, when you read this, you're not going to want to stop reading because something's happening on every page. Something crazy's happened, something humorous is happening. You're going up the roller coaster, down the roller coaster, right? Like something interesting is happening on every page. And so I really wanted to like capture the reader's attention and almost wanted to read it from beginning to end. And so hour and a half, if you're like, an average reader, if you're faster, maybe you could read it a little bit faster, but you can almost read it over your lunch break. And I was like, that was kind of my goal, something different, but something that was like really fast and easy to read, and that it would just be really relatable to a lot of people.
Sweet. Well, and speaking of relatable, and my man's got recipes. So, if your fabulous book, Meth, Murder, and Amazon, if it were a food, what would it be and why?
It was the food. Oh man, that's a good one too. Um, hmm, making me think on these questions. Maybe like, I mean, I guess I could say a frittata, right? Like, I like making frittatas. They're fun to make and they're super simple, but they have all these ingredients, right? And so my book has tons of ingredients. Yes, I'll say it's a humorous book, but that's not just all that it is, right? You learn about real estate. I teach you about price increases, staging, but then there's also tons of mystery in there as well as almost like crime elements. So there's just so many ingredients in the story that it really makes it just super unique. And I really feel like that's kind of how frittatas are, right? They're very unique, and you can any frittata can be anything that you want there. You want bacon, sausage, eggs, cheese, right? Like if that's what you want, put it in there. You want to add potatoes, peppers, right? You can add that too. You can add them all in there, and they're super simple to make. And so I won't say that the book was easy to write, but I felt like because I was writing something that was so like close to me personally that it made the story easier to write. The second one is a little bit more tricky, right? Because I'm writing fiction, so it's I'll use my life experiences to kind of shape the story, but a lot of those stories are not true. Like they're just something might have happened in my personal life. I'm like, oh, that might be funny to write about. But the first one was really I was trying to keep it, pretty close to what it was.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. So, indeed, first guest to refer to their book as frittatas.
I couldn't say it was something like like a steak dinner or anything like that because like it's a short read, right? If it was like those books like 4, 5, 6+ hours to read, like hey, maybe it might be a full course meal. But I felt like frittatas are fun. Anybody can make them, right? Even if you're not a cook, you can still probably figure it out because it's basically like egg pizza, super simple. I think there was a movie that Harrison Ford was in. He was like a reporter, and gosh, I can't remember the name of the movie, but he was in it and he was a reporter, and so he was making a frittata on TV. He was like, "Oh, I know how to make those. My dad taught me," and so then that was like inspired me to like add the frittata recipe to the website.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. I'm talking about, indeed. So, my goodness, so being a wonderful U.S. Navy veteran, I should say, and being a father of five, man, so how are you able to find this time to be able to basically write and get your talents out there? Because a lot of folks will be like, man, God, how is he still awake and how the heck does he even find the time to write?
So part of it goes back to the time that I was in the Navy and I was going to school full time. So I was working full time, I was going to school full time, and I still had children. And so like I really wanted to get my degree and get out of the military. Like I didn't want to be in for 20 years. That wasn't my plan. My goal was to get my degree. That's really why I joined. So when I was going through school, I was like up till like 12, 1 o'clock at night. And so for like 15 years, it's been like that. Like the only times I probably would have been before midnight or is if like I'm usually sick, right? I'm not sick very often. So that's about the only time I'll actually go to bed before midnight. So I'm usually up pretty late. But there's times, right, where I'll just be like, hey, it's kind of a downtime, everybody's kind of quiet. I'll just start writing. And so my process is a little bit different, I'll say. Like I actually write my whole first draft on my phone, which is, I don't know, good, bad, and different, but that's what I do. I feel like it keeps me kind of close to the words, and I have my phone on me all the time for work anyway, so it makes it kind of easy. Like, oh, someone said this, that would be funny. My kids will, talk about video game characters, or they say a funny name, like, oh, that would be a great book character name. So I'll just take what somebody said and kind of play with it. And so, I felt like that was a good way to do it for me. And then I'll plug it into the computer, and then I'll do my second round of like proofreading and editing, and then I'll add content and stuff like that.
Sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's just like anything else, right? I mean, you prioritize what's important to you and what you can make time for. And so I just try and find the time where I can. If I don't write a day, like I'm not going to beat myself up about it. Hey, didn't write anything today. I'm going to write something tomorrow. And sometimes it doesn't happen. Like first book, it took me about 3 months to write. This new one took me probably closer to 5 months to write. But we had just had a newborn, and so I actually got 3 months of paid time off for that. Colorado has a law that fathers and mothers both get 12 weeks paid time off. Since my company is based out of Colorado, I got 12 weeks off, and so I took a lot of that time to write over the course of 3 months. I wasn't done when I went back to work, but I finished it like maybe like a month and a half afterwards. So I just try to use the time wisely when it's given to me, but I also make sure to spend a lot of time with the family. So
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Night owl swag and prioritization ahoy. That's right, indeed. And then have another kid if you're married, if you're have a spouse.
right, I mean, honestly, everybody's like, how do you have so many kids? And it's kind of true. I mean, I do have a lot of kids. Like I have a big family. I actually only planned on having one. I just wanted one kid. So that wasn't what was in the cards. And so my father-in-law, he has 8 children, and so my wife has 7 brothers and sisters. And so he'll tell me these jokes all the time. He'd be like, "Man, I'll go to these work meetings and be like, "You have 8 kids, Ed? Like, how do you have so many kids?" He's like, "Well, it's just what happens, right? It's not like I was like, hey, I'm just gonna have 8 kids." They're like, "Hey, you should sleep on the couch." He's like, "Well, I did that. I slept on the couch. Then we had another one." So, right, like he's a funny guy. He'll tell me these funny stories. But it's true, right? I mean, not that I plan to have 5 kids, but I certainly said the Lord blessed me to have 5 children because they're all great and they all are just amazing kids. I'm very blessed.
Sweet. Good old best laid plans, as they say.
You want to make
That's all.
God laugh? Tell him about your plans.
Sounds like a man's a fellow believer.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed, man. Since your fellow believer, always invite fellow Christians to share the salvation testimony on the podcast for the curious minds and ears out there. So, mind sharing yours?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I felt like I've been in the church for a long time. My mom took me to church when I was little, but I felt like, everyone has a different journey and a different testimony. I went to Christian school, so I was raised in a Christian household, but I felt like, my mom was the one who was always going to church, but my dad really didn't go. He would go like Christmas, Easter, right? That was the one time I ever saw him at church. My mom took me, and so I felt like she instilled that, really good upbringing in me, that faith. And then as I got older, I was in the Navy, I away a little bit. There was no churches that were close by when I was deployed in California. That was my years after we got there. I moved to Virginia Beach, and that's where I found a really great pastor. Went to counseling with him for stuff I was doing with in the Navy, and he actually gave me a great Bible verse, and it's Jeremiah 29:11, and it's for I know the thoughts that I think towards you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. And I really grasped onto that, and shortly after I got that, I'd say maybe 2 years or so, my dad passed away. And so I was thinking, like, man, I want to get a tattoo. And so this is kind of how the tattoos came into play. Got the got the tattoo, and I wanted to get a cross, like I always wanted a cross, like a really cool looking cross. And so it's like, maybe I should get this Bible verse in there. So I got the cross, then I got that, and then it just kind of spiraled from there. And so I went from being a believer, right? Like, I always believed in God. I would say I probably would find a time where I didn't believe in God, like it would actually be. I feel like I've always been one. But as I've gotten older, especially as I've gone through different difficult times and seasons, it's really the Lord that's been there. Has been able to be my stronghold, right? And so people will be like, "Oh, you just need to be happy." Oh, right. Like, I feel like happiness is a myth because it's based on your circumstances. It's going to ebb and flow. Hey, you're going through a great time. You're going to be super happy. Guess what? You have a bad experience. Like, you're going to be super low. There isn't going to be no happiness. And so that's where joy comes from. So I heard one of my pastors say one time, like, joy is calm delight, no matter the circumstances, right? Like, you can have joy if you're going through good times and bad times. And so the more I dive into the word, the more I experience that. And then I also instill that in my children, just the more my faith grows and I'm able to just share that with others.
Sweet. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. So, a man's got it embedded in him.
Yep, that's right. There's a verse in Proverbs. It's like, basically, train your child up in the way, and he won't drift from it, or he won't depart from it. And so I think that is true, right? Like, even if you look at the story of Samson, his parents were super, religious, right? They raised him to be a believer, and then he gets all this strength, and right, he falls away. He does his own thing, right? He goes away from what God's will was, but at the end of it, right, he comes back to what he knows to be the truth and what his faith is actually built on. And so at the end, right, he does call on God, right? He rescues everybody, he tears the walls down, right, and kills all the Philistines. So even though you can raise your kids one way, that doesn't mean that's how they're going, like they're always going to follow it, but it'll still be there with them. I think that's important, right? That's why I constantly am talking to my kids about the Bible. We'll do little devotionals with them. We'll try to, make them more Christ-like, bring that belief, instill that belief in them so that when they are going through difficult times, through adversities, they're able to overcome and really lean on their faith, because that's really what's going to get them through it.
So I'm talking about indeed. So I'm talking about indeed. My man's preaching, baby. That's right, indeed. Giving that good word, indeed. That's right, indeed. And I guess in more ways than one when it's written and then spoken as well. That's right, indeed. Sweet. Appreciate you for sharing that, my man. Definitely appreciate it, indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the
Woo.
opportunity. I think you're the first person that's actually asked me. So it was great.
Heck yeah, man, because regular everyday Christian probably ain't even gonna talk to some random person about it if evangelism isn't their thing. So I was like, let's give them an opportunity. That's right, indeed. Where it's like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that's right, indeed. That's right, indeed.
Science, right?
Woohoo! Well, we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you were to wake up tomorrow and you were 25 again, but you're still in the current year, what advice would you give to yourself?
What advice would I give to myself? Hmm. Man, you got some good questions today. I like it. If I would give myself some advice, it would just be keep going. I feel like sometimes things get difficult, right? And so, you always hear the saying, "Hey, bad things happen to good people all the time." It's 100% true, right? I mean, that's even the story of my first book, right? Bad things happen to good people, but it's really how you deal with that adversity and overcome it. And I feel like, when I was younger, I was probably stupid, as all of us are when we're younger and we do dumb things. I drank a lot. Not a ton, right? Like I was an alcoholic, but I would definitely like go to parties and drink and stuff. And so I would tell myself to stay away from those things, right? There's no good things that come from alcohol, only crazy stories and stories you probably don't want to remember about yourself. But honestly, just continue to fight through adversity and not try to be angry about it, right? Like I feel like the question always is like, why is this happening to me? Right? That's always the wrong question. It's really like, what is God trying to teach me through this? So it's just a mindset perspective, right? It's a shift in perspective. It's asking the actual right question, right? Because if you're focused on like, hey, why is this happening to me? You're being selfish, right? Bad things happen to people all the time. When you actually look at it, hey, what is God trying to teach me? Your focus shifts, your perspective shifts, and you're like, oh, what can I learn from this, right? Because you're always going to go through difficult times. It's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. It's not always going to be good times. You're going to be faced with bad things, adversity, right? There's always going to be the peaks and the valleys. And so when you're going through those valleys, just weather the storm, right? Like good things are just around the corner. And so I would probably tell myself that.
Nice. So I'm talking about indeed, talking about indeed. Solid as a rock advice. You love to hear it.
Yeah, I
Sweet.
mean, it's tough, right? Because I mean, I feel like there's so much negativity in the world, and right, you turn on the news, right? It's all negativity. Go online, it's all negativity. Someone did this happened to this group of people, right? It's all doom and gloom. And so that's kind of why I chose to write the book the way I did in the first place, because I felt like humor is a great bridge. Who doesn't like to laugh? Laughter can even like change your day, right? Hey, you're having a rough day, someone says something funny, it can change someone's day just completely around just by sharing a nice word or just telling them a joke or saying something funny. And so that was really kind of what I was trying to bring to the table with the way that I write, right? Like I'm always going to write something that's humorous. There's always going to be funny parts, but there's always going to be a little goodies included inside.
Woohoo! That's right, indeed. Gotta live the goodies indeed. That's right, indeed. Humor is definitely great. Because folks are gonna be needed now more than ever. That's right, indeed. Gonna need it now more than ever. I know folks probably gonna be needing your book now more than ever too. So for those who need to snag some copies of your marvelous book and keep up with your journey and all the stuff that you got coming up, what's the best way for folks to do so, Jerry?
Absolutely. So I have a website. It's gsgerry.com. On there, you can find my social media information. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest. I think there's one I'm on there as well. But anyway, pretty much my website, or you can reach out to me on the socials. My books are on there as well. Not the new one. The new one's on pre-order. It's coming out in September. So Hysterical Hangouts with the Hindlegs. That's the reality show one. That'll be out in September. Meth Murder on Amazon. That's the Meth House book, right? That one's out now. So
Well, there you have it, folks. Gonna put links to all those wonderful things in the show notes, indeed. So, cop some copies of my man's book, and be on the lookout and pre-order some copies of my man's follow-up book, The Sophomore Title, indeed. So that way y'all can get some of that goodies in your reading time, indeed. And if you don't have any reading time and you're listening to the show, well, that's a miracle indeed, because my man's got you covered. So that way you can add reading time back into your schedule, indeed. So my goodness, any parting words before I close up shop?
I really appreciate you having me on, and just some of the great thought-provoking questions that you asked. Sometimes, they're kind of the boilerplate questions, but I feel like, you have some really great questions. You actually made me think, and that doesn't always happen. I feel like I usually have a pretty good response pretty quickly. As far as the guests go, right? I mean, I feel like the message should just be, right, be yourself, be unique. If you're gonna write, just do it. Just like Nike says, right? Just do it. Nothing's stopping you but yourself, right? I mean, that's pretty much my story. I wrote a book, and it kind of started as an inside joke, and then it's evolved into this crazy thing I'm doing now, where I write books and come on podcasts and talk to people about it and get to share my story. So it's all a blessing. Just stay true to yourself, and write what you know, like Mark Twain said. Write what you know. I feel like that's always going to be your best recipe for a great book.
If you're hearing this part of the episode, that means you're one cool individual. Thanks a bunch for tuning in, and if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to share it with at least one other person in your network. Bonus points for 3. And be sure to check out the backlog too while you're at it, because there are hundreds of wonderful episodes to choose from as well.